Good evening everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy Daily News Analysis. Given here a list of topics for today's discussion, and one by one we'll be discussing all these important topics. PDF of this discussion is also available in the description section, and you can also access and download this PDF. So the first topic that we're going to discuss is about the Delhi pollution level. This topic is important for General Studies Paper 3 mains examination, particularly from the syllabus point of view: conservation, environmental pollution, degradation, and environmental impact assessment. And if we look at a brief background of Delhi air pollution, we all knew that Delhi is one of the most air polluted cities in the world. And in fact, there are a number of reasons for Delhi's air pollution, but one by one, we'll be understanding the reasons for Delhi's air pollution and why there is a concern. Because recently the Supreme Court has asked the Commission for Air Quality Management, CAQM, and also Central Pollution Control Board, both these organizations, to submit an affidavit about Delhi air pollution and the measures that have been taken by both these organizations to control Delhi's air pollution. And in fact, as I've already told you, that Delhi is one of the most polluted cities in the world. And in fact, Delhi very often faces a very high and dangerous levels of particulate matter, which are PM 2.5 and PM 10. And apart from that, there are several other toxic gases as well. Nitrous dioxide and sulfur dioxide, they are toxic gases. However, the air pollution in Delhi particularly increases during the winter months, and we'll understand the reasons for increased air pollution levels in winter months as well. However, the Delhi air pollution also causes severe public health problems and environmental issues as well. So therefore, it is going to affect the human health in Delhi and other cities as well. So let's understand what are the reasons for air pollution in Delhi. In fact, there are a number of reasons for a significantly higher levels of air pollution in Delhi. Now, in fact, vehicular emissions is one of the most challenging issue that has been contributing for Delhi's air pollution. In fact, according to some estimates, Delhi has over 12 million registered vehicles. And in fact, the vehicle emissions are the major contributors of particulate matter 2.5, nitrogen dioxide, and volatile organic compounds. And sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, volatile organic compounds are the major toxic air pollutants. And similarly, Delhi is an urban center. And in fact, the ongoing construction infrastructure activity is also the major source of air pollution in Delhi, because the infrastructure projects and new buildings generate tons of or lots of construction dust as well. And in fact, they are being suspended in the air, particularly during winters, and that further contributes to the Delhi's air pollution problem. And in fact, we also knew that in Delhi there are several other industries as well. So therefore, industrial pollution, because these industries generate carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxides, which are toxic in nature. For example, thermal power plants and other industries which are located around the Delhi, they generate the particulate matter, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, and nitrous oxide compounds, which are toxic in nature, and they also contribute to excess levels of air pollution across Delhi. And similarly, household fuels also contribute to air pollution, because in some areas within Delhi, households still dependent on biomass, wood, and coal for cooking or heating. And in fact, they have a lot of potential to increase pollution, and in fact, this is very common and prevalent in the low income areas within Delhi. However, we can say that these are the local emission sources. However, if we talk about other major sources of Delhi's air pollution, crops stubble burning. We all knew that immediately after the Kharif season, the farmers in Punjab, Western UP, Haryana, Rajasthan, they prepare for Rabi season. And because of less time available from after Kharif season harvesting and before the Rabi season, what farmers do? Farmers would just burn the leftover stubble. and it is prevalent in states like Punjab, Haryana and Western UP. And this stubble burning has also been contributing to the excess levels of air pollution in Delhi. So during winters around the Delhi, you could observe a thick smoke during October and November, and mostly this can be assumed to the stubble burning which has been taking place in states around Delhi. And in fact, during winters, weather also contributes to the excessive levels of air pollution in Delhi. And in fact, during winter seasons, temperature inversions takes place. And this temperature inversion along with the low wind speeds across Delhi, so they trap pollutants near the ground during the winters. And in fact, during Diwali also, because of firecrackers, they can also contribute to short-term and high pollution spikes across the Delhi city. So therefore, this is also a major reason for the air pollution across Delhi during the winter seasons. And recently, the Delhi government aimed at cloud seeding across the Delhi city to control air pollution. However, since the air pollution levels have increased, the Supreme Court has asked Central Pollution Control Board and Commission for Air Quality Management about the steps taken to control air pollution across Delhi. So let's understand health and environmental impacts of the excess levels of air pollution across Delhi. Because it is generally believed that air pollution in any city would have a huge consequences on human health as well as environment. And in fact, in cities where there is excess or higher levels of air pollution, people would face respiratory diseases. Those diseases including asthma, bronchitis and COPD as well. And in fact, the cardiovascular problems are also the other major consequence of excess levels of air pollution. Because air pollution very often increases the risk of heart attack and stroke among the people, particularly the elder people. And in fact, the long-term exposure leads to the shortened life expectancy of people who are living in cities like Delhi. And also it is expected that people who are living in Delhi, they would have life expectancy less than 5 years of average Indian citizen. So this is primarily because of higher levels of air pollution that the people of Delhi have been experiencing. However, on an example, 18th November 2024, the Air Quality Index has noted that Delhi has the score of 441. So in fact, air was unsafe even for a healthy individuals also. So let's understand the environmental and social impact and the effects of air pollution. In fact, due to excess levels of air pollution, there is a very high level of smog and poor visibility as well. And in fact, this condition may disrupt the economy and road transportation. So therefore, it could also disrupt the air transportation as well. Secondly, it may lead to the reduced productivity and also increased healthcare expenditure on the part of the government and individuals. It may also increase the total out-of-pocket expenditure on healthcare. So therefore, this may cause a serious implications for human health and also human finances, and it will also impact their livelihood as well. And in fact, smog also reduces the solar energy generation efficiency. We all knew that the government has been emphasizing on solar energy generation. But if there is an excess smog because of air pollution in cities like Delhi, that would reduce the solar power generation capacity. So in fact, these are health and major environmental impacts of air pollution in Delhi. However, let's understand government measures and actions that need to be taken. If you look at the existing policies that the government has launched, so the policies including Graded Response Action Plan. And in fact, this Graded Response Action Plan includes different plans of action based on the levels of pollution. And in fact, the Graded Response Action Plan includes implementation restrictions based on air pollution levels. For example, ban on diesel trucks and halting construction activity to prevent the construction dust. And in fact, these measures would be taken when there is a higher levels of air pollution in cities like Delhi. Secondly, government also implements odd even scheme to reduce emissions from the vehicles. And in fact, it limits vehicle use based on the license plate numbers and this is known as the odd even scheme. And in fact, promotion of cleaner fuels is also another option that cities like Delhi have adopted to reduce air pollution caused by the vehicles. And in fact, adoption of Bharat Stage 6 fuel standards, electric vehicles, would further reduce the air pollution levels in Delhi, because promotion of cleaner fuels will reduce number of vehicles on road which are based on diesel and petrol. Vehicular emissions can also be substantially reduced by this. And in fact, the farm support initiatives should also be provided, because stubble burning is also one of the major reasons for a severe level of air pollution in Delhi. So, government should distribute mechanisms or machines like Happy Seeder to reduce crop burning. And even monitoring and awareness is also very important. In fact, Delhi has an extensive real-time air monitoring network. Campaigns should focus on encouraging citizens to use public transport, wear masks, use air purifiers at homes. However, not all people can afford air purifiers at home. However, people should be encouraged to use public transport like Delhi Metro, which is pollution free. And apart from that, people should wear masks if they come outside. So these measures have been taken to reduce the level of air pollution in Delhi. However, the immediate concern should be addressing the short-term air pollution, the short-term measures to address air pollution. However, one such short-term measure is cloud seeding. And in fact, the government tried to inject aerosols into the air to create artificial rainfall through cloud seeding. However, this is largely failed. However, in fact, the government should focus on long-term measures to curb air pollution levels across Delhi, because the long-term air pollution mitigation measures would be sustainable in nature. And next very important topic is about the High Seas Treaty. And this article has been given in the Hindu newspaper, and this is important from your syllabus point of view, Gender Studies paper 3. In conservation, environmental pollution, degradation and environmental impact assessment. And in fact, this is given in the Hindu newspaper as well. So let's understand what is this High Seas Treaty, why there is a need for a High Seas Treaty, what are the challenges. Now, if we talk about the High Seas Treaty, it is also known as biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction. In fact, it is also important to protect biodiversity in global high seas. Global high seas are also known as global commons. They are global commons, that means that is the property of the entire world, not one single country. So in order to recognize the importance of protection of biodiversity beyond the national jurisdiction, the Global High Seas Treaty has came into effect, and which is also known as biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction. And in fact, this is an agreement. It has been ratified by over 60 countries in September 2025. In fact, the biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction is also expected to come into force in 2026 as well. However, it seeks to preserve sustainably the use marine biodiversity. Right? So it focuses on preserving and sustainably using the existing marine biodiversity beyond the national boundaries or national jurisdiction in global high seas. Now, in fact, the world, across the world, oceans makes up around 2/3 of world's oceans. Right? So in fact, the global high seas, they make 2/3 of the global or world oceans. So the treaty will also address issues like overfishing, marine pollution, climate change impacts on global ocean ecosystems. So therefore, this is a comprehensive treaty that focuses on protection, conservation, sustainable use of biodiversity beyond national jurisdictions. So I hope you have understood what is Global High Seas Treaty. And in fact, the need of this treaty actually arose from the gaps in the 1982 UN Convention on Law of Seas, which is also known as UN Clause. And as of now, UN Clause is a major international convention or treaty that governs the global seas. However, there are certain shortcomings or gaps, and that has led to framing of the Global High Seas Treaty. However, the UN clause lacked detailed provisions for protecting biodiversity in the international waters. So in order to protect biodiversity in the international waters beyond national jurisdiction, there is a need to bring High Seas Treaty. In fact, if you look at the historical background of the Global High Seas Treaty, the UN General Assembly in the year 2004 set up a working group to address these issues of protecting, conserving, sustainably using marine biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction. However, by 2011, all the nations have agreed to negotiate on 4 important pillars. The 4 important pillars including marine genetic resources, area-based management tools, environmental impact assessment, capacity building, and technology transfer. Now, in fact, after convening all these 4 conferences from 2018 to 2023, a consensus has been reached on March 2023. And in fact, a treaty which is also known as Global High Seas Treaty was also adopted in June 2023. So this is the background of the Global High Seas Treaty. Now let's try and understand key provisions of the Global High Seas Treaty. Now, protection of marine genetic resources is one of the key provisions of Global High Seas Treaty. And in fact, MGRs are also known as genetic materials from marine organisms. They are being recognized as common heritage of humankind. MGRs are the common heritage of humankind. And in fact, the treaty also mandates fair and equitable sharing of monetary and non-monetary benefits. And in fact, this has also been recognized on Convention on Biodiversity. Convention on Biodiversity also talks about fair and equitable distribution of benefits arising out of the sustainable usage of the existing biodiversity resources. In a similar way, High Seas Treaty also talks about fair and equitable sharing of monetary and non-monetary benefits, through the method of benefit calculation remain unclear. Now let's understand this with an example. Now in fact, the biotechnological research, and it has been using genetic material from deep sea species, it will require benefit sharing with all the member nations and not a one single nation. This is what the marine genetic resources and benefit sharing it talks about. Now let's understand area-based management tools and marine protected areas, MPAs. Because the Global High Seas Treaty has also provided for the creation of marine protected areas. The aim and objective of creating marine protected areas is to conserve and protect the existing ecosystems. And in fact, the existing ecosystems are also facing new threats from the climate change and global warming. So therefore, the marine protected areas will be created to enhance climate resilience and also secure food resources as well. However, the area-based management tools and marine protected areas, they will integrate scientific data with indigenous knowledge for the better management of existing biological resources. And then there will be a comprehensive environmental impact assessment, and it will also be carried out. Environmental impact assessment will be carried out to assess the impact of a particular project on the existing environment. If that particular project and its execution is harmful and dangerous for the existing environment, then the mitigation measures will be taken. However, in some cases, the project execution will also be halted. However, the Global High Seas Treaty mandated that the environmental impact assessment is mandatory for activities with potential adverse impact on marine environments, particularly transboundary and cumulative impacts. So let's understand capacity building and technology transfer aspects. Capacity building and technology transfer is also very important from the point of view of developing countries, least developing countries, and also the island nations. And in fact, the developed countries should provide capacity building. They should emphasize on training, technical assistance, and benefit sharing of marine research data with the developing nations and least developed countries. In fact, these are some key provisions of the Global High Seas Treaty. However, let's understand some major challenges, major existing issues in Global High Seas Treaty. In fact, in the Global High Seas Treaty, there is a legal ambiguity. And in fact, the legal ambiguity stresses on tension between the common heritage of humankind and freedom of the high seas. So therefore, there is always a conflict between these two values. And in fact, governance is also another major challenge, because as of now, there is no clear formula for benefit sharing with respect to marine genetic resources. And in fact, there are also risks of biopiracy by the developed nations since they have technology and resources. And in fact, those developed nations may not be able to share the benefits with the developed countries or indigenous communities as well. However, the major countries are not participating in the Global High Seas Treaty. It would further weaken the implementation of the High Seas Treaty. In fact, countries like US, China, Russia, they have not yet ratified the treaty. The ratification of these major powers is very important for the successful implementation of the Global High Seas Treaty, and this could be another major challenge. And apart from that, there are also a lack of coordination between the International Seabed Authority, which has been created by 1982 United Nations Convention on Law of Seas, and regional fisheries management organizations. So therefore, achieving convergence and coordination with these organizations is very important for the success of Global High Seas Treaty. So these are the major issues and challenges within the Global High Seas Treaty. I hope you have understood this. And next very important topic is about digital arrests. Recently, the Supreme Court has held that digital arrests are a very big challenge, and they are focusing mostly the elderly, and so far 3,000 crore has been lost in India because of the digital arrest, and most of the victims are the elderly. Now this is very important for the prelims point of view, and in fact in syllabus current events of national and international importance. So therefore, let's understand what is digital arrest. And in fact, recently Supreme Court has made these comments with respect to digital arrest, that this is a very serious issue, and in fact the government need to act against digital arrests to protect people, mostly the elderly, because the digital arrests are mostly targeting the elderly population. Let's understand what is digital arrest. Digital arrest refers to a cyber fraud tactic which scammers impersonate law enforcement officials, including CBI, police and ED, etc. In fact, the scammers or fraudsters call an individual impersonating the CBI officials, police officials, ED officials, and they ask for a large sum of money. And in fact, they also falsely accuse the victims of crimes of money laundering, drug trafficking, human trafficking. They create a fear in the minds of the victims, and they also extract a large amount of money from the victims. Most of the victims are the elderly individuals. And in fact, the victims are coerced to stay on video calls and threatened with immediate arrest unless they transfer money or share personal details with them immediately. This is how digital arrest is in news, and in fact it is a very serious issue because India has already seen 3,000 crore of scams through digital arrest. Let's understand the modus operandi of the digital arrest. Calls or messages via WhatsApp, Skype and Telegram would be the major medium of this digital arrest. In fact, people who are doing this digital arrest, they use fake IDs, uniforms, and they also show forged documents to the victims very often. And in fact, they threaten the victims to stay isolated throughout this video call, and they are also forced to make payments or reveal OTPs or bank information. That's how the victims are losing thousands of crore. Now, in fact, they create a psychological fear, and authority mimicry are the key tactics of the digital arrest. Now, if you look at the recent data of digital arrest, in 2024, Indians have lost 120 crore to digital arrest scams, and this is as per the Ministry of Home Affairs data. And apart from that, more than 92,000 complaints reported between January-August 2024. However, a 78-year-old Ahmedabad man, he lost 939 lakh after a scammers posed as CBI officers and demanded ransom from him. And in fact, in July 2025, a West Bengal court, it gave life imprisonment to 9 accused individuals in India's major digital arrest case, which involves more than 1 crore fraud. So therefore, the law enforcement agencies need to act swiftly to deal with the cases of digital arrest. There is a need for large-scale awareness among the people about the digital arrest, so that they will not fall prey to the digital arrest. And if you look at the legal and governance issues in India, this digital arrest is punishable offense under IT Act 2000 and IPC Section 419-420, which involves cheating and impersonation of law enforcement agencies. However, the problem is that in India we don't have any specific digital arrest law. And because of this reason, enforcement is also complicated by cross-border VoIP operations. So that's how digital arrest is a very serious issue in a country like India. So therefore, the Supreme Court has also asked the government to act in a stern manner with the digital frauds, including digital arrest. I hope you have understood this topic, and that's it for today. Thank you so much. Please like the video and also subscribe our YouTube channel. If you have any doubts, you can post those doubts in the comment section as well. Thank you so much.